All right, our next question revolves around the popular TV show, The Office. In Season 5 of The Office, Michael Scott leaves Dunder Mifflin to start his own paper company after his fallout with management, convincing 2 employees to come with him. After undercutting Dunder Mifflin's prices, the Michael Scott Paper Company begins to steal clients. Michael is offered a buyout by Dunder Mifflin's CFO, but before the deal goes through, Dwight, a Dunder Mifflin employee, finds out that the Michael Scott Paper Company is bankrupt. Jim, a current employee at Dunder Mifflin, who is married to Pam, a current employee at the Michael Scott Paper Company, hides the fact he knows that the Michael Scott Paper Company is going bankrupt and dismisses Dwight's claims, leading to the buyout to happen in the form of 3 jobs. Was it ethical for Jim to hide that he knew of the bankruptcy and get his wife and friends their jobs back?
So basically, it wasn't Jim's responsibility to alert the company of the doings of the Michael Scott Paper Company. His job is basically as a salesman, and it just so happens that he's married to a person who works for their competitor. So if Dunder Mifflin expects for Jim to tell them like confidential information, like, he doesn't have the responsibility to do so, and he really didn't have any job to work for the bailout anyway, like for doing any information gathering. Like, all he was a salesman. He's not getting paid extra to be like, a researcher into whether there should be a company buyout. So there's no ethical reason for him to tell Dunder Mifflin that, hey, the company that you're trying to buy out is about to go into bankruptcy.
I agree with Simon on this. Surprisingly enough, there's a requirement on the part of Dunder Mifflin to do adequate research on firms that they're seeking to buy. To go in, what's the asset value of this company? What are we getting with them? Essentially, Dunder Mifflin panic bought because they saw that all their clients were being swiped away. They panic bought out their competitors. So when you do that, there's going to be an information premium that you're going to pay. And Dunder Mifflin, in their panic, did not do their research into the Michael Scott Paper Company well enough to see that, oh, this company has about 6 weeks left of solvency. If we just wait them out, we can get our business back. Instead, they rushed into a deal, and that's the price of rushing into that deal. It's not Jim's job to tell them, oh, hey, this company might be going bankrupt.
I do think, though, it is Jim's job not to tell them that they're not. Like, Jim should have not dismissed Dwight's claim. I don't think that was necessarily ethical in itself, because that's essentially,
But Dwight also has the ability to send this up the chain.
No, he does as well. I don't think Jim's I think Jim has a responsibility not to do anything, not to have a conflict of interest in this scenario. I think what he should do is remove himself from the entire conversation. And I think him dismissing the claim to Dwight, I don't think is ethical. But I do think that Jim, I don't know how Jim dismisses it, because to my
Jim
understanding,
isn't really involved in the decision.
So Jim dismisses it by bringing up that Dwight is basically crazy. Like, Dwight came in saying, hey, I've got information about the Michael Scott Paper Company, and you should really hear me out. And then Jim comes by and says, oh, like, you have information about the rat problem in the building, or something to that effect.
all right.
And yeah, that didn't really pan out. So Jim doesn't outright deny saying, hey, Dwight is wrong here. What he does is bring up other things that Dwight has done to try and show that Dwight is kind of untrustworthy when it comes to investigating things.
That sounds like more of a distraction than an outright.
Yeah. You can go, Neev.
So if I'm not wrong, I believe the CFO of Dunder Mifflin was consulting with Jim. At that time, he was in the room. He was ordered he was the person that informed Michael Scott about the offer originally, if I'm not wrong. Correct me if I am. But when you are being trusted by the CFO of your company, then when you're given access to that information, you are technically a part of this purchase plan. You're part of this acquisition, so you do have the duty to inform your company of significant material facts regarding that acquisition, right? Because one way the company is doing research is by sending Jim in. It might not have been direct, but that is one way. So they did have the resources in place to do their research. But then Jim decided to stick with a personal conflict of interest rather than with his company.
So just to,
Well,
before you guys continue, just to bring this up as well, Jim was the one who was sent down to make the initial proposal of a buyout, and that was on company time as a company representative when he was informed that the company, that the Michael Scott paper company was going bankrupt. So I just wanted to clear that just to make sure there was no confusion. And Divya, you were speaking, so.
Yeah, I feel like
continue.
he shouldn't have been the one. I feel like if I'm understanding the situation correctly, he shouldn't have been the one to actually create the proposal by Dunder Mifflin because of he has the conflict of interest with the Michael Scott company because his wife works for there. So I feel like the company itself made a mistake of doing that.
No, there-
That falls on Dunder Mifflin because it's not like Jim. I know this is The Office, so you know it's not like Jim and Pam's relationship is a secret in season 5.
like they're
Yeah.
they're literally married.
They're married, and everybody was at the
Well,
wedding.
they're not married, but
They're not married at that point.
they're
but,
not
like,
married yet. They're
they were
dating,
engaged.
but it's public. They're
Yeah.
engaged. That's
Also,
it.
the reason Jim was sent in was because Michael Scott Michael Scott likes Jim. Like, he has a friendly relationship with most of the Michael Scott paper company, which is why they thought that him giving the proposal it would sound better coming from them.
So
But the point is, as Chris mentioned, sorry, just 1 second.
sure.
He was a company representative at that time during working hours. He obtained material information. He was a part of the acquisition in his own way. So I do believe that it was his duty to inform the CFO and bring that up rather than dismissing Dwight's claim.
So Jim gained the information that the company was going bankrupt from his wife, not from Michael Scott. So
His
they
wife
had a
was
private
already part of the
conversation.
I
company.
believe that's
However,
incorrect.
And that was no, when he went down to tell Michael Scott of the buyout plan, he went down and said, I am here to just give you information and learn as little as possible. And when he said we're thinking Dunder Mifflin is thinking of buying you out, and Michael said, but Jim, we're going, and then Jim stopped him. Jim stopped him from saying that they're going bankrupt. And essentially did not learn any information from Michael Scott about the company's plan. What he learned was from Pam, but prior to being, told that he is to be the intermediary between the two companies. So
Jim does have plausible deniability there. Michael could have been about to say, we're going to get a water slide.
Yeah.
And Jim knew that, like, if he heard Michael say, we're going bankrupt, like, he can't do anything about it. That's why he stopped him.
I do think. Oh, my bad. You can
Go
finish.
ahead, Peter.
I'm sorry.
I'm basically done.
I do think that it does come down entirely to, like, the way it's told. Like, with his wife, he has no. I feel like that's just, like, personal information that doesn't have to be exposed.
Yeah.
And, like, I think we might want to explore it if we take the two different pathways. That seems like. Because if he was told, well, I guess he did do exactly that. If he was told from Michael Scott, that would be positive deniability. But I do think, even the fact that he has a conflict of interest, I still think it's the company's fault. So I think if he doesn't tell the company should assume that he has a conflict of interest, and then that is one of the risk factors that they are willing to accept going into it.
Here's how I see the problems. Jim is knowingly engaged to 1/3 of the Michael Scott paper company, and Dunder Mifflin still sends him in. Dwight has, David Wallace's phone number. Dwight has called David Wallace on multiple times. Charles is literally at the desk, like 10 feet away from Dwight. Dwight did not tell either of those people that the Michael Scott Paper Company was going out of business. And Dwight's aware of this information. Dwight instead took that information and sent it horizontally across the command structure because Jim is also just a salesman. And Jim's not empowered to change the deal. Jim's just the intermediary.
What happened was that Dwight went to his superior with the information. Jim rushed in with him to try and distract from it, and it worked.
He tried to send it up the command structure, but essentially Jim forced it to be sent horizontally across the structure.
Yeah.
Then that fault still lies on David and Charles because they chose not to take Dwight's claim seriously.
Now,
and they chose not to investigate the Michael Scott Paper Company on their own anyway.
Yeah.
If
they took the approach of talking to any of the clients and noticed that, hey, they're asking for more money from their clients, like they would know that they are not in good shape financially, and it is basically on them for not doing the research. However, Jim, in real life, if this happens, and Jim should have basically recused himself right away. Like if we're talking about business ethics, he technically worked in favor for the Michael Scott Paper Company, but he should have recused himself.
In that sense, the fault, I think, goes on both of them. Both on Jim for not recusing himself.
Yeah.
Agree. Also on Dunder Mifflin because they should know that this conflict of interest exists before they even pick Jim.
Yes.
As we've been saying, this is a very public relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And we can mention too that the reason that Dunder Mifflin panic bought the Michael Scott Paper Company is because there was a shareholder meeting coming up soon. So because of that, management didn't want to make it seem like they lost a lot of clients.
Yeah. I think the argument that Michael Scott went to try and up the price of the company was that, hey, we don't need to wait out Dunder Mifflin for them to go bankrupt and for us to win. No.
Dunder Mifflin needs to wait out us.
No.
Because we're going to hold their clients, essentially.
No. Basically, Michael had the argument like, I need to wait out you, David Wallace, because if you don't buy me out now, the shareholders will vote you out of your position and will fire you. So David Wallace kind of put his personal job ahead of the company there. And that is also a failure of business ethics.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because David Wallace was afraid of the job repercussions coming to him instead of, forcing the company into a possibly bad deal.
Yes, but in David Wallace's view as CFO of the company, isn't him keeping his position in the best interests of the company?
Not if the shareholders don't think so.
But the shareholders haven't decided that yet. It's not like the shareholders said, David, you're fired, and he barricaded himself in his office and refused to leave.
So the thing is,
David Wallace is trying to preserve his job before the shareholders find out that anything is wrong. All companies do that.
They do, but I don't. Is it ethical?
Generally, the interests of management and the interests of the shareholders are aligned. Just
Generally.
for different goals. The shareholders are there to make money. The management's there to preserve their jobs. Both want the business to succeed.
Fair.
Do we have anything else on this topic?
No? Well, I think we
Okay.
came to a good conclusion that everyone wasn't ethical, basically.
The
Everyone's
fault is on
unethical.
everyone.
The fault is on everyone, and this is a television show.
Okay. So in that case, we're going to move right along.